Now, another important form of documentation is called SOP, stands for Standard Operating Procedures. You need to take a look at table 6.5 and 6.6 on your textbook, page 898. SOP is really important in the GMP condition, right? You probably have written one in your previous class. So the main function of the SOP is what? To provide a step-by-step outline of how you could carry out a task. Okay, and there's a very detailed instruction that you need to follow. Then you will not make any mistake in your task. So it is to develop a kind of standardized instruction for the users to be able to complete the task. That is the function of the SOP. Okay, so the SOP is so clear that there will be no questions asked. By reading the SOP, you should be able to carry out the task. That is the level of detail that is required. Okay, no question or deviation is allowed in SOP. You just need to strictly follow that instruction. Okay. Example SOP is given in your textbook, figure 6.2. Take a look at it. Take a look at the format and everything. So you will be writing one in your lab. So we'll talk about this more. And then there's another working instruction called protocol. So it is a description of a procedure that tells an operator how to perform a task or an experiment. So protocol and SOP are kind of similar in their functions, but SOP is more of used under the CGMP requirement, CGMP condition, but protocol is not. So take a look at the format and purpose of the protocols on page 99 and page 102 in your textbook. Okay. And then forms, depends on your SOP. There may be some forms associated with the SOP, because when you measure out your, chemical, you may need to, fill out how much of the chemical you measured out, and you initial and date. And your partner should validate your task every time you perform. So forms are typically associated with an SOP, and filling in, there are a bunch of filling in blanks where whenever you complete a task, you fill out the blank, and you move on to the next task and then fill out another blanks. So that's how the forms are typically used. Take a look at the form example given in your textbook, again page 101, figure 6.3. And then logbooks. Logbooks are associated with the instruments and equipment. Okay, so logbook is the place where you can check the condition of your instrument before you use it. It tells you the status of your instrument and the maintenance record, and then the last user, the condition of the instrument when the last the person used the instrument. So the detailed information about the condition of your instrument should be found from logbook. Okay. Another important documentations are labels. Labels on your chemicals or labels on your drug products. They are very important because they keep the most essential information on your chemical, equipment, raw materials, products, okay, or other items. Okay. For example, if you are making a solution in the lab, you also have to provide a label for that solution on the bottle that contains the solution. Okay, so then what are the most essential information that should be found from the label? Of course, the date when it's made and the name of the chemical, ID number if it's applicable, a lot number, composition, what it's made out of, safety information if something happens, and the storage condition. Okay, so if you look at this chemical, you can find its chemical name. Okay, it's what it's made out of, the chemical equation of the chemical, and then the purity of it, and it's hard to read it, but storage condition, okay, its reactivity, okay, and then maybe the toxic information, okay, it's highly toxic, okay, and then all other information, how much is in there in the bottle, the chemical number, lot number, everything. Okay, so they are very important communication information that should be delivered to the users. Okay, so the labels are very important. They are highly regulated by the US Pharmacopoeia or the FDA. Okay, and the next one, the chain of custody documentation. Of course, the documentation is used by many people involved in the manufacturing, for example, and then from one department to another. Okay, so by the time your product is all made and released, okay, it should have all the necessary information that should be traceable, okay, from what time of the date, okay, that particular manufacturing process started, and then who was involved, and what was the next manufacturing step was, who else was involved, and the next step, until the last step where the QC and QA did the validation task and they are ready to release. So understand the chain of custody documentation. So all the chronological history of your product or sample preparation should be able to found there. And forensic lab example, for example, you are working in the forensic lab. Of course, mix-up is not allowed there, right? So what case that evidence was collected from who? Was it from victim? Was it from a suspect, or was it from a person involved in the evidence gathering? So all those information should be there, and who did the analysis, of course, and what date that was performed, and then should be returned to the right person, right? And then training report, again under the CGMP, okay. Training report is needed because all the operators, everybody involved in the product manufacturing should be qualified, and their qualification should be evidenced by their education, training, and experience. So training report is an evidence that this person is qualified to be able to work in that environment. Of course, that's important, right? Production related documentation, okay, of course, batch record. Whenever there's a batch of product made, there should be a batch record that goes with that product, okay. So it shows what the product is and how it's made, and from what raw material it's started with, and how those raw materials are treated and went through what kind of processes, and what SOPs were followed. And then most of the batch record is issued by a QA, okay, maybe the QA department, and have many blanks that should be filled by the operators, their initial and date. So example is given in your textbook on these pages. And the regulatory submission, like I said, clinical trials or manufacturing for commercialization, whatever that is, you have to deal with the agencies, regulatory agencies like the FDA. So if you are going through a clinical trial, of course, there's a IND, investigational new drug application, that should be filed before you start your clinical trial. If you are about to go through the phase 3 and phase 4, and you need to file NDA, new drug application. And then when there's a audit visit from the FDA, they may give you FDA warning letter based on the result of the audit. Okay, so those are all regulatory submission related documentation. And product release documents, of course, it will certify that the product is safe and it meets the specification. Okay. Now, many of the documents and documentations are used on electronic format. Okay, so electronic documentation is becoming more and more important. Okay, so there's an FDA new addition in the CFR Code of Federal Regulation 21 Part 11 on the electronic documentation. It says it provided the criteria for the acceptable electronic documentation. Okay, it was intended to permit the widest use of electronic technology, as well as to validate the electronic methods to be as secure, reliable, and searchable as paper systems. So the electronic documentation, if you decide to use it, it should be at least, reliable, searchable, as good as the paper form. Okay, so that's the requirement. Okay, finally, there's a homework assignment. Okay, so I already gave you one homework assignment about your career, and then here are more. So if you visit this website, okay, so you can copy and paste this website on your search engine, and then you will be able to go to the NC Bio Network. NC Bio Network stands for North Carolina Bio Network. They developed a whole bunch of good online learning modules. Out of all those learning modules, I want you to pick 3 of these topics: CGMP basics, lab safety, and then the deliberate documentation. Those 3 learning modules, e-learning modules, you need to go through all 3. Okay, and then once you have gone through each module successfully, at the end you'll be able to download your training certificate, completion of your training certificate. So I want you to do that. Download all 3 training certificates and then upload those certificates in your course shell. So each certificate you upload, you will get 5 points as your homework assignment. Okay, I think that's it.